Now, I want to turn though next to a different part of the world that we're keeping a very close eye on today. I'm talking about Hong Kong because over the past couple of hours, protesters have forced themselves inside the chamber of the Legislative Council. You'll hear that shortened to LegCo as people talk about what has been happening. I have two of my colleagues with me here that have been watching it avidly. Laura Westbrook, just back from Hong Kong. I'm sure our listeners will have heard and seen you over the past weeks or so, Laura. Good to have you with us. Also, Kerry Allen is with us, our BBC Monitoring China analyst, a regular voice on the programme, helping us understand also what's going on in the Chinese language media when it comes to events like this. When you began seeing over the past couple of hours, Laura, what was happening, how does it compare with those protests that you were witnessing just a week or so ago?
I think what you're seeing tonight is a new level of anger in Hong Kong. Protesters there have been trying to bash their way into Hong Kong's parliament all day for hours now. They finally got in. They spray painted the walls, withdraw extradition bill. Carrie Lam stepped down. They've got into the chamber. Right now we're seeing pictures where there's hundreds of protesters still there. There's also quite a lot of media as well. And I think what you're getting is this sort of sense of desperation amongst a lot of protesters. They feel they are not being listened to. They feel like they have no choice. As you were saying, I've been in Hong Kong for the last 2 weeks, and I was at a protest last week, and I was talking to people there, and I was asking them, why are you still here? What's keeping you out on the streets? And people were telling me that they just feel a lot of anger, not only towards the government, but towards Carrie Lam. She's kept out of the public eye for about 10 days now. They feel like she's not listening to them. They've clearly given her their demands, which is to withdraw this controversial extradition bill. They also want her to step down. But essentially the main point is they want this extradition bill withdrawn, and she has so far refused to engage with them and has so far ignored their demands. So I think what you're seeing tonight is a sense of desperation and a renewed sense of anger and frustration amongst a lot of young people who feel ignored.
I want to bring in Priscilla, who is in Hong Kong, has been at the protest today. Laura, you can feel free also to speak to Priscilla. Priscilla, I understand you're a university researcher, you're 34 years old. What do you feel when you see some of those pictures that are taking place in the Legislative Chamber?
Yes, I feel desperate and nervous and worried as well, because many of them are our Hong Kong young people, and they risk their lives, they risk their future in order to proclaim certain kind of freedom and also the human rights. So I'm worried because the police actually they are now being very brutal nowadays. They just if you saw the news pictures today earlier this morning, I mean, you can see blood coming out from people's head because police are now using brutal violence. So I'm very worried for the protesters in the LegCo chamber.
I just want to repeat what the Hong Kong police had posted on Twitter in the past half hour or so. Some of those sounds that people will be hearing, the clapping that is coming from inside the chamber. The police said the building was violently attacked and entered illegally. The police condemned this attack. The police will conduct sweeping, which I imagine kind of gathering up people in a short period of time, and take reasonable force. They also appealed to protesters unrelated to this event to leave the vicinity. Do you agree, Priscilla, with these protesters going into that building?
I personally would not do so. But there are meanings behind the action, because I feel like the protesters, the young protesters, they would like to pronounce their rights for opinions. Because the LegCo chamber is a place where Hong Kong people's opinions should be heard, but then they feel like their opinions are not being listened and being respected, and so they have a need to enter the chamber in order to proclaim of the space, if you understand what I mean.
I do. I also have my colleague Laura here, who's just back from Hong Kong a day or so.
Yes, Priscilla, you're saying that protesters are risking their future, and that's because If this is called a riot, then they are risking being put in jail for up to 10 years. And that is what these people right now are risking, isn't that right?
They are risking exactly these jail times, yeah.
What do you think can happen to diffuse this situation, to calm down this, what some people have described as panic, or a panicked atmosphere that is there right now?
I believe Carrie Lam should really step out to talk to our young people, because she has been in hiding for around like 10 days already. And so I feel like she really need to start a dialogue with us directly, not through the pro-establishment camp, but through us with us directly. So this will really calm us down a little bit, yes.
But some would say, destroying pictures, daubing walls with graffiti, they basically came in with corrugated iron sheets, pieces of scaffolding, all this thing to kind of enter, people are saying, quite an aggressive way into that building. That's not really a way to start dialogue either.
Because they see no point to go further anymore. That's why they do all these graffiti or entering the building in certain kinds of forceful way. But if Carrie Lam now can just step out and talk to them again, I feel like they will be able to calm down and even undo the graffiti. If you see some of the pictures taken from the LegCo, they are actually doing certain kind of discipline in the LegCo offices. They are paying for what they have drunk. They are paying for what they have eaten. In the tuck shop, in the vending machine, in the LegCo. So they are not doing any kind of disturbances.
I understand.
They're just trying to occupy a space where they feel like their opinions should be heard.
I will say as well,
Carrie Lam should just come out and talk.
Well, stay with us, Priscilla. I'm just going to tell our listeners a little bit of what I'm seeing, and it is quite orderly within, I will say, in the legislative chamber. Some were actually just sitting in the legislators' seats, checking their phones, things like that, and milling around, really, I suppose, and trying to figure out what the next course of action might be. Kerry Allen also with us, as I mentioned. Is the Chinese media covering this?
Well, they've been given opportunity to. I mean, these kind of actions of protesters, smashing the windows of the LegCo, these will be, the government has been handpicking incidents like this, where there's what it sees as hooliganism or rioting, and basically presenting these to the Chinese public as the one-sided view. But at the same time, today's a very sensitive day, not only because it's the 22nd anniversary of Hong Kong's handover from the UK to China, but also it's the 98th anniversary of the Communist Party. So there's a lot of dialogue about the strength of the Communist Party. I mean, Hong Kong coming back, its power. So, I mean, these pictures that are appearing now of people inside the LegCo, the government would not want to show this whatsoever. I mean, it was very happy to basically give the impression of that the police were being peaceful. It was showing protests from over the weekend and saying, showing people with placards saying that the police, that they supported the police, and that's the impression that people are getting in mainland China. But yeah, these kind of acts of hooliganism now entering into the LegCo, the government would not want to show this kind of disruption within an area that it considers Chinese. I mean, it says that Hong Kong is a part of China. So, I mean, suddenly I've noticed, literally in the last half an hour before I came to sit down, the word Hong Kong's become censored again in Sina Weibo and China's social media platform. So, yeah, very sensitive.
Also, I'm just wondering, Kerry, I mean, some of the people that this may filter through to, Chinese that are living perhaps outside mainland China as well. I mean, would they be sympathetic to Hong Kong?
Oh, yes and no. I mean, because the government in mainland China sets such a kind of, it's one of the most tightly controlled media environments in the world. I mean, basically, they have been all along saying that, you know, Hong Kong belongs to China, and on a day like today where the Communist Party it's 98 years old, you know, there's this kind of idea within people's, you know, minds within mainland China that you know, it's so strong. It's lived for 98 years. It can live for many years more, and they're saying it's forever young. But a lot of activists from overseas, you know, they have access to independent media, and they're seeing things like South China Morning Post. They're seeing foreign media coverage, and you know, they worry about freedom of expression. That within mainland China there are these tight controls, and they are actively trying to share reports with people in mainland China who only see this one-sided view.
And it is worth saying as well that you have mainland China, but you also have Taiwan, which has been following what's happening in Hong Kong very, very closely. There has been protests in support of what's happening in Hong Kong, and what's important and interesting to note is that in January they're having presidential elections, and actually a lot of people are looking at what's happening in Hong Kong, and support for Tsai Ing-wen, Taiwan's current president, has increased, with people looking at what's happening in Hong Kong and supporting her party. And I think that is something that Beijing is probably looking at quite closely as well.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Priscilla is still with us. Priscilla, you've heard a little bit about what's happening or the way it's been perceived in China. I'm wondering about within Hong Kong, within that older generation, when they see some of these images that we are seeing of the Legislative Council being defaced with graffiti or pictures that have been vandalized, that many feel could turn the public in Hong Kong against the protesters.
Surprisingly, no. Actually, I know many older generation, and of course they are not very supportive to the action, but then they are very understanding. I feel like this is very special to highlight in this whole no China extradition movement, let's say a movement, a protest. This whole protest, we are very much in a very understanding way of protest. So even though we don't support the youngsters in breaking in the chambers, but then we feel like they have their reasons. We understand their reasons. I feel like the whole two generations, they're actually communicating in this way.
We will see, though. Fernando Cheung, who is a pro-democracy legislator, he did feel that the protesters played into the government's hands, other people even calling it a trap.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing is, what's interesting to see is the tactics of the police here. All day, they've very much held back. They've allowed these protesters to storm Hong Kong's parliament. They very much kept this tactic of staying back. A lot of people there have said that they didn't even see some police, and I think this is a deliberate tactic by the police, because there is this sense of 2 weeks ago there was accusations of police brutality, and it's what spurred a lot of people to take to the streets even more. And so today the police taking this step back, this tactic of keeping back and allowing the protesters to do this is something I think definitely deliberate, and something that they're trying to let the public see.
Yeah, absolutely. And this basically, the mainland wants this too. It wants to show that the police are stepping back. I mean, the images that I've seen on Chinese social media, in Chinese traditional media as well, are the police. There are protests that are peaceful about the police, and the police are being peaceful. There's no indication of any bad behaviour whatsoever from a Chinese perspective.
Kerry Allen, Laura Westbrook, thanks very much coming over, and Priscilla as well, who stayed on the line with us, one of the protesters in Hong Kong, just really digesting, analysing, putting context to these extraordinary pictures that we're seeing out of Hong Kong as hundreds have stormed into the Legislative Council. The time is 11:46 at night, just to give you an idea of what Hong Kong is going through right now.